Before we get into the fun stuff, I know we've mentioned a couple of times the surveys on the tables. And I know it's like you're eating breakfast, enjoying each other, but the surveys are really helpful for us because the goal of today is to not only make sure y'all walk away with a lot of really great information, but to make sure that it sticks, right? To know what we're doing right when we host these things. So please do fill out the surveys to completion, and we'll come around and pick them up. They help us understand how effective we are and how we can improve. Also, for housekeeping, you'll again hear a lot of great stories today, and we want to make sure to minimize distractions. So if folks could please pull out your phones and put them on silent for us, that'll help us just make sure that everyone is able to hear the stories that you're going to see on the stage today. So with that, I'll introduce myself. My name is actually Wynn, and it is my first time in Detroit. So yes, thank you. I'm here from Atlanta, and I work as the Director of Community and Growth for Acclinate's Now Included community. Did anyone get a chance to see what Acclinate and the Now Included community is? It's okay if you hadn't, okay. Well, what Acclinate's Now Included community is, it is a platform that is online and in person that just serves to empower people to make better health decisions, especially communities of color. Our company is actually Black founded and woman co-founded, and it was founded by two people who are passionate about making sure that our communities have equitable access to different health resources and can make better health decisions. Clinical research is something that we also focus on a lot because historically we know that with clinical research, our communities have either been not included at all or included in the wrong ways. So we want to make sure to change that because a lot of clinical research informs the medications, the treatments that can help improve our health. So that's a little bit about Acclinate and our Now Included community. We have been in Detroit before. Our head of community is actually based in Detroit. Oh, sorry, I don't know what the feedback is for. Our head of community is actually based in Detroit, has friends and family here. So we've done events here before, and we'll definitely be doing more events in the future. But with that, we have partnered with the Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation to host this event today. So I'll pass it to Ala to speak a little bit more about Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation.
Thank you, Wynn. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming out this morning. We do appreciate your presence and your interest in what we're talking about this morning. So my name is Ola Banjo, and I am the Senior Director of Community Engagement and Partnerships at the Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation. And our goal today is really for you to walk away empowered and knowledgeable about multiple myeloma. And we always say, even if you have no exposure or no previous knowledge of multiple myeloma, the information that you receive today can impact your life or the life of a loved one who is facing cancer in any capacity. So with the Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation, we are the largest nonprofit organization in the world solely dedicated to accelerating a cure for multiple myeloma. We are patient-founded. We have been around for 26 years now. And one of our core pillars is to empower the myeloma community and myeloma patients. And we realize that our work in research is not done until we make sure that everyone has access to novel therapies, novel medications, and really everyone has access to better outcomes. So our work today is really just to make sure that, while we are, very dedicated to clinical research and, extending the life expectancy for myeloma patients, we want to also make sure that we are equipping our communities with the information needed to make better health choices and have better communications with your healthcare providers. So you'll hear a lot of great stories today. You'll hear from wonderful myeloma thrivers. You'll hear from healthcare professionals. And we encourage you to ask questions. This is an open and safe space. Anything that comes to mind, please ask, because when else are we going to have, such great subject matter experts in the room? So we look forward to just a meaningful conversation. And again, thank you for coming. Please take the time to fill out your surveys. If you haven't had breakfast, grab something to eat, make yourselves comfortable, and we look forward to spending the day with you.
Yes, and just one more note, acknowledging that we are guests in Detroit and guests at the Northwest Activity Center. I don't see Ms. Carr in the room, but we did want to make sure to extend appreciation to not only everyone in this room who has been at the Northwest Activity Center before for allowing us to take up space here, but also specifically to Ms. Carr, who has played a huge role in helping us make this happen. So please give it up for yourselves and Ms. Carr. Lovely. And with that, our first panel is actually going to have Ala as our moderator, as well as 3 lovely panelists. So I'll have them come to the stage and do introductions. Welcome your first panel.
All right, thank you, and welcome to our panelists. So just to do very quick introductions so we can get right into it. To my right, I have Dr. Jeff Zonder, who is a professor in the Department of Oncology at the Barbara Ann Karmanos Cancer Institute and Wayne State University School of Medicine. So he is the leader of the KCI Multiple Myeloma and Amyloidosis Multidisciplinary Team and co-leader of the Molecular Therapeutic Program. So Dr. Zonder he has co-authored numerous original research papers, review articles, and I mean, it doesn't get any better than, than Dr. Zonder. And you'll hear from Shannon and John, who are his patients as well. So, you know, we're really fortunate to have him in the room. And then I also have Shannon Love Johnson, who is often referred to by her loved ones as a ball of sunshine, and I can see why. She was just 41 years old when she was diagnosed with multiple myeloma. And while the cancer diagnosis was earth-shattering for the mother of 2, she was determined that it wouldn't be a death sentence. She's on a long-term clinical trial doing biweekly infusions, and treatment is a big part of her life, but she has persevered to maintain a career as a communication expert through graphic design. Well, welcome, Shannon. Thank you very much for joining us. Last but certainly not least is John Rathel, who is a Michigan native, born and raised in the Downriver community of Lincoln Park. And John is also a patient of Dr. Zonder's. He enjoys sports, and his greatest passion is backcountry camping and mountain trekking. I can tell you're very active because you've climbed several of the highest mountains, including Mount Everest Base Camp and Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa. And he is married to Linda, and after 38 years, they have 2 daughters and 5 grandkids. So I think one thing that we'll definitely see and hear all throughout today is just how, you know, our myeloma, we say myeloma thrivers, are doing so well. So we'll jump right into it. All right, so Dr. Zonder, I'm going to start with you. Now, you know, we want to kick off the day, first of all, with just setting the basics. What is multiple myeloma? So painting a picture for you here. So if someone walks into your office and has never heard of multiple myeloma before, no medical background, how do you explain to them in the simplest terms what multiple myeloma is?
Thanks. And I'm really honored to be part of this panel and this program in general. And it's nice to see everybody here this morning. Multiple myeloma is a form of blood cancer, and so when we think about blood cancers, we think about them in terms of what kind of blood cell has become cancerous, and in the case of myeloma, it's plasma cells. Plasma cells are the cells in our bone marrow. They're part of our immune system. Everybody has plasma cells. They make antibodies, and when a plasma cell becomes cancerous and overgrows the bone marrow, that's multiple myeloma. Sometimes somebody's diagnosed with multiple myeloma because blood tests picked up an abnormality and they're not even having symptoms yet. That's called smoldering myeloma. That's a situation that usually doesn't require treatment immediately, but it identifies somebody as a person who needs to be watched really closely because full-fledged myeloma can have lots of different symptoms. The ones that we worry about are bone lesions, like weak spots or holes in the bones, high calcium levels, which can affect the kidneys, other kinds of kidney injury, low blood counts, high risk for infections. Those are the usual symptoms of multiple myeloma when it's become active. And when someone has those symptoms, that's a situation where they actually need to start treatment.
No, thank you. So now I do want to pass it on to Shannon and John. So Dr. Zonder, Jeff is your doctor. And we'll start with you, Shannon. If you can please tell us about your path to diagnosis, including your initial symptoms and how you found Dr. Zonder.
Okay. So initially, I was working part-time for Delta Airlines as a baggage handler. And I was in the best shape of my life. I felt so, accomplished. I'm like throwing luggage and, it was great. It was invigorating. And so, and I did it for the flight benefits. I could fly anywhere for free. So it was an awesome part-time job. Anyhow, I thought that I had injured myself, slinging luggage. I was having horrible pain in my left arm. And it started in July of 2017. And so I started, trying to go to the clinic at work and trying to see a chiropractor. And it was just getting worse and worse. I ended up going to the ER, and because it was my left arm, they thought maybe I was having a heart attack. And so they put me in cardiac observation. Still nothing. And so I just started favoring this arm. I wouldn't even hug. I would lean in. And then it started getting to the point where I was having to lift my arm to put it on top of the table. It was just, I'm thinking I injured myself. So this went on for a few months. The initial symptoms started in July. By October, it was unbearable. And I went to the chiropractor for the last time, and I left out of there in a face full of tears. I'll never forget. It was the night Michigan and Michigan State played each other. I went to the ER, and I was there all night. And finally, they did some imaging, and the doctor on call came in, and he said, "Has anybody ever talked to you about bone disease?" I'm like, "Well, no." He was like, "Nobody ever has mentioned anything about osteoporosis?" I said, "No." He said, "The imaging, you look like an 80-year-old woman. Your shoulder looks like an 80-year-old woman." And I was 41. And so I'm like, what? And he's like, "Let me take images of the other side." He came back in, he said, "The other one looks like you're 80 years old. I'm gonna send you to an orthopedic specialist." So I went to the orthopedic specialist a couple days ago. They had more comprehensive imaging. And he came in, he said, "Do you see this? It's like something, it looks like something is eating your bones." So I had, holes in my bones, in my arms, and it's a whole rabbit hole from there. He ended up referring me to an orthopedic oncologist, which he told me he was sending me to a specialist. I called to make the appointment, and when they answered the phone, they said orthopedic oncology. That was the first time I heard the word cancer. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I'm driving. He didn't mention cancer, so anyhow, long story, it ended up being, cancer. My bones were, shattering, broken because of the multiple myeloma. I had no idea. And it's much more to the story. So anyhow, I ended up starting chemotherapy, then preparing for a stem cell transplant. And I had an oncologist, and he referred me to a Carmanos doctor. That's the Cancer Institute. He referred me to there for my stem cell transplant. And he recommended me for a clinical trial after that, which I would have to have a Carmanos doctor. And I'm so grateful because that's how I was able to connect to Dr. Zonder. And it has been life-changing to be under his care.
Thank you, Shannon. All right, John, over to you. We'd love to hear about your journey and how you met Jeff.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you and everybody for coming out, but having me participate. These types of events, of meeting people, one of the biggest benefits for me of being diagnosed was the people that I would have never met in my life without this diagnosis, and I can tell you that I'm a better person for it. So thank you for having me come out. My journey with myeloma started, well, first of all, I blame my wife for it, okay? Because I was fine. I had nothing wrong. I was I was 52 years old. I hadn't given up my dream of pitching for the Detroit Tigers. I was running and exercising and climbing mountains. And my wife just kept telling me, you know what, you missed your 50-year physical, you better go get a physical. I said, honey, I'm fine. And she, like all good wives, just kept bugging and bugging and bugging and bugging. And it wasn't until I went to get that physical did I find out that I had multiple myeloma. I would have never known. That's my story, I think. But obviously, checking and being checked by doctors as we get older for all kinds of diseases is the way to go, right? We want to make sure that we see our doctors and get these tests done. And a disease like multiple myeloma can be diagnosed with just a urine test, which is what happened to me. I had a lot of protein in my urine, and it came out that I had this. So I had no injuries like Shannon. I had no lesions in my bones, but I was diagnosed with smoldering myeloma, right? And this was in 2012. And for the next 3 years, I saw Dr. Zonder every 6 months. We just had our tests. And then I went on my way, and then it turned into multiple myeloma. And then I made another mistake. No, it wasn't a mistake. I'm sorry. I gotta change my thinking on this. We have life, right? Everything is going on. We don't have time for cancer. We don't have time for stuff. It's, we've got our families. We have things we have to do. All the dreams and hopes, especially as we get older, become more important. And that's what happened. I had my oldest daughter that was getting married. So I had no son-in-laws. We have 2 daughters. But I had to get her married, and that took time. And as that was going on, I kept delaying treatments, until finally it got to the point where I snuck in a stem cell transplant at the very end. Thank God, and I think that faith plays a very important part of these diseases too, of giving up and giving to God helps you get through these. And we went through the stem cell transplant in 2016, and from leaving that to today, I've been on various kind of maintenance treatments, a couple changes here or there, but we're sitting here, Shannon, right, to be able to tell our story, right? So thanks to Dr. Zonder and the Carmanos team and MMRF, so thank you.
Thank you both for sharing your stories. I think it's remarkable how you both got to your diagnosis. So Shannon, you went through the bone pain and through multiple healthcare professionals before you landed at a diagnosis. And John, yours was seen in a routine lab work. So something we always emphasize at the MMRF when we're talking to patients in our community is it can be found in multiple different ways. It doesn't have to be as dramatic as what Shannon described. And we always tout the importance of your yearly physical because, like Dr. Zonder mentioned, multiple myeloma can be found in routine lab work, and that's why we encourage folks to keep up with that lab work as well.
And I want to add this because I was just talking to Dr. Zonder about this at the table before we came up. I actually had seen my primary care physician. I had a physical that year, and my proteins were high and my hemoglobin was low, and she missed it. So that is, something that I just want to bring that to the attention. Sometimes things are missed, and I probably could have avoided some of the, the pains, but unfortunately, things can get missed also.
Absolutely, and thank you for bringing that up because that's something else that we talk about. It's just, taking a look at those labs also and asking questions, right? So sometimes we wait for our physician. I mean, they might catch it, they might not catch it, but just on our part, when we talk about being more empowered with our health is, just always following up, but also being willing to ask questions and not feel like you're challenging anyone. It's just, being more informed. Along those lines, and just talking about the care team, Jeff, I do want to find out from you, how can patients build the right team to get the best care if they are diagnosed? And then can you also highlight why Detroit is well positioned to care for myeloma patients?
So, I think building a care team, and I'm gonna mostly talk about like the healthcare professionals that are part of your care team. Obviously, and both of you will be able to speak to this, your care team extends into people in your lives, right? And so we're just part of your care team. The Detroit community, Southeast Michigan, actually is, in terms of healthcare, a really remarkably great place, nationally. We have some major medical systems and the cancer care that people can get in Southeast Michigan between Karmanos, University of Michigan, the Henry Ford Cancer Center, it's Corewell now, Ascension. These are very good medical systems, and each of those systems that I mentioned have very good oncology physicians in them. Karmanos and also the University of Michigan, which is another MMRF affiliated site. We have big myeloma programs for sure. But there are a lot of myeloma knowledgeable doctors. And so, I always, I feel like part of my job is, sometimes I'm managing somebody's medical situation, but sometimes I'm working with the doctor that's managing their situation. And I think a key thing when you find your doctor, find somebody you fit with, right? They should be knowledgeable about the disease, but also they should be knowledgeable and interested in you, and there should not be ego issues. Ego issues are a red flag from my standpoint. Sometimes I'm a second opinion. Sometimes somebody I see gets a second opinion. And, patients, when they're dealing with a major diagnosis like multiple myeloma, need to, I think, do the footwork and get the information that they need to be comfortable with their doc. And so I make it a point, my philosophy is to work with whatever doctors are involved. I would say that the other point though about building a care team, myeloma is one of those conditions as Shannon pointed out with her bone issues, and as John discussed with his kidney issues, this is it's a multidisciplinary disease, or in simpler terms, it's a team sport. We need experts with different skill sets involved with the management of patients who have myeloma, and so I depend on orthopedic specialists. I depend on kidney specialists to help manage patients, and even before that, during diagnosis, I depend on pathologists, who are looking at biopsy samples, radiologists who are looking at CT scans and MRIs to help make an accurate diagnosis, the best, clearest diagnosis, and then forming a care plan. And most centers, Karmanos, Michigan, and most of these other places that I mentioned, we have multidisciplinary teams specifically dedicated to the management of specific cancer types. So every Friday, like right this morning, right before this session, we had our weekly myeloma and amyloidosis multidisciplinary team meeting, and we discussed cases as a group with radiology, pathology, stem cell transplant, cellular therapy docs, myself. We had that call this morning, and then when the call ended, I drove over.
No, thank you for sharing that. And I think it's it's noteworthy what you said, and then just combining that with what Shannon and John described. Shannon, with you seeing multiple healthcare professionals and landing at your diagnosis, and John, with you seeing your primary care physician and then being connected to Dr. Zonder, it really shows how much legwork, like you said, Dr. Zonder, needs to go into it to make sure that you're receiving the best care. So, Shannon, I'll start with you again. We've heard about your journey, leading up to now, but we also know that, like you said, you described yourself as a ball of sunshine. You are doing well and looking great. Tell me, how has multiple myeloma changed your life? And also, in addition to that, just like Dr. Zonder referenced, how has your community played a role in your care? So not just the healthcare community, but even your personal community.
Okay, yes. So multiple myeloma has changed my life drastically, and I'm several years in now. I was first diagnosed in 2017. And so I have, it's just part of my life. I do, you mentioned in my bio, I do treatment twice a week, every other week. I've been on disability for, all these years, which is very difficult, coming from, a pretty rigorous career and being very active. And so now having to be, on disability and still, still trying to be creative and still trying to, stay relevant in my career, in my career path. But there are, a lot of challenges with it. I'm just used to it now, right? And I'm a mother, okay? My son is a freshman at Morehouse College. I'm so excited about that. And thank you. And my daughter is a junior at Cass Tech. And so when I was diagnosed, they were much younger, and they've been on this trek with me. And so I am so determined to show them and to show the people around me, this is not a death sentence. You can keep going, you can keep fighting, you can keep tweaking and fine-tuning. And I would be remiss to not acknowledge my faith community, my church, my spiritual parents, Apostle Clarence Langston, Pastor Robin Langston of Word in Action Christian Center right down the street. And the faith has been the guiding light. The scripture that I stand on is Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, plans to give you hope in a future. I live by it. I stand on it. But I also want to talk about, the people that are close to me, the people who lift me up. I have, a very close friend group, but I also have an extended group of people, an extended family who I think they look to me for inspiration, and so that keeps me lifted. I have a friend here, Tanisha, who is a multiple myeloma patient also, and I referred her to Dr. Zonder, and she is in full response now. I just want to be a beacon of light, a beacon of hope, to just let people know that this is not a death sentence. You can, like I said, you can fine-tune, you can tweak, you can keep going. But there are some things you were asking, how has it changed my life? I do want to call attention to a couple things. When I was first diagnosed and I was, experiencing this excruciating pain, one thing that is still vilified, but that was very, very critical and helpful to me, was the use of medicinal marijuana.
In terms of appetite, helping appetite, suppressing nausea, potentiating the benefits of other pain medications so that you can minimize those other pain medications, sleep. A lot of patients are, cancer patients are using it now, and patients with other chronic diseases too.
One other thing that I want to say is part of my caregiving community. I have a friend who, back in 2007, she's a supplemental insurance agent. And back in 2007, way before multiple myeloma was ever even on my radar, she signed me up for some supplemental insurances. She told me a story about her aunt who had a critical illness insurance policy for years, and then just kind of got lax with it, let it lapse. And I think 2 weeks later, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. So I have had a critical illness policy since 2007, right? And so I think I was paying like maybe $13 a month for it, right? And so I think that something that we should talk about as a community, particularly the African American community, is having supplemental insurances. I have a supplemental disability policy, I have a critical illness policy, I have accidental policies, just in case, right? So when I was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, I had a $30,000 critical illness policy. And then, I mean, it was perfect because I'm going off to have a stem cell transplant. I also had I had disability, which was $1,000 a month. I mean, it just really helped me get through a time where I wasn't sure how I was going to have an income. So just wanted to say, I think that everybody should look into having supplemental insurance policies, particularly critical illness.
Thank you, Sharon.
Sorry if I was long-winded.
No.
Are we addressing questions?
In 1 minute, we'll hear from John, and then please hold your questions. We'll definitely get to it.
Remember I said I was going to, what Shannon said? What Shannon said. I can't add anything to that from a support community. But your support community grows, right? Mine did today. Because now all of you are part of my support community. Because anytime Shannon and I get up here and talk in front of people, you're supporting us, okay? Because it makes us feel like we still matter, right? That we're giving something. So that's all I'm gonna say about that, but I am gonna talk about marijuana. Be careful. Do it under a doctor's supervision. I did it under my uncle's supervision. He makes candy. Forgot to tell me how much to take, and that it takes about a half hour before you start eating more. Well, a half hour later, I'm going, this stuff's overrated because I had shingles during so this stuff's overrated. I didn't take enough. Next thing I know, Shannon, I am on a boat in a river with tangerine trees and marmalade skies, writing Beatles songs with John Lennon and Paul McCartney. And I never know that I actually did that. When I got done with that, my wife said, "You are never doing that again." And I said, "Oh, I'm doing it tomorrow. We got to finish this third song." Be careful with that.
No, thank you
be
both
careful.
for your insights. And as a pharmacist, I would like to say, talk to your doctor. Run it past your care team. There definitely are several novel therapies and treatments out there, and there's not one size fits all, right? So that's part of the conversation that we're having now. And then part of that conversation also includes clinical trials. So I know we've got a few minutes left in this session, but Jeff, I do want to hand it over to you just to really lay out for the group, how do you approach conversations around treatment options like clinical research with your patients? And then just talk to us about the importance of raising awareness and destigmatizing clinical research.
So the initial conversation about treating multiple myeloma, especially for younger patients, who are first diagnosed, who've never really had major medical problems before, it's a very long and complicated conversation, just for starters. Even talking about standard of care therapy, what's emerged right now as the standard of care for most patients is a cocktail of 3 different drugs plus an antibody, and then a complicated conversation about stem cell transplant, which is what some people call it bone marrow transplant, but it's high-dose chemotherapy and then getting your own stem cells collected from your blood and given back to you afterwards. So imagine having that conversation. You're talking about the side effects and schedule of 4 different drugs, and then what are we going to be doing in 6 months, and then what do we do after that? And then what do we need to do about your bones, because there's other medications for that. And then which preventative antibiotics do you need to be on, and it's a long conversation, right? And trying to figure out, like, is all of that right for one patient who's sitting in front of you, or do we need to modify it somehow? Takes time also. And so it's important to get to know a patient. As you're having this conversation, it is much easier to do it face-to-face than when, like during COVID, when we were doing lots of telemedicine, when you can't register how somebody's reacting to what you're saying. It's a very hard conversation, because it's important to recognize when something needs is being received in a certain way or needs clarification, and it's very hard to tell sometimes when you can't literally see the person sitting in front of you. That conversation, what are your goals? What's in terms of your current life and lifestyle and family, like which parts of that are most important to be able to maintain? Like all of that factors into that initial conversation, right? And then after all that conversation, which can take an hour all by itself, then we have to talk about clinical trial options if those are available. And at any major center, there will be clinical trial options available. And I think an important thing to understand about clinical research is, ethically designed clinical research never results in a patient getting something that's less than standard of care therapy, okay? Like there should not be a concern in 2024 about being randomized to therapy that is inferior to what you'd be getting if you weren't on a trial, okay? If we would never open a trial like that at the Coronavirus Cancer Institute. I would never consider having that trial in our program, but if I did, our institutional review board would come back at me and say, you can't do this. There are safety checks along the way with clinical research, multiple safety checks at any institution to make sure that the trial's ethical, that patients are informed about the risks, and that the docs and other people on the team involved with the research know what they're doing and are going to conduct it in a correct way. I think it's very, very important to make sure that if a research trial is one of the options available to a patient, that they hear about it. There's all sorts of reasons that the African American community specifically is underrepresented in research studies. Part of it is historical, for sure, and that needs to be recognized and acknowledged. I think if we don't acknowledge that, it's like we're putting blinders on. But the other thing, just taking it to right now, I think one of the biggest reasons that that relative to the number of African American patients who have multiple myeloma, and the risk of myeloma in the African American community is twice as high as in the white community. But the reason that less, I think, are participating in clinical research has to do, I think, a lot of time with not being offered a trial in the first place. Not having access to a center where there are research trials, and then when there are research trials, not being offered the trial. And so we have to spend the time talking about those studies. And that does make the conversation longer. Sometimes it makes the conversation a two-part conversation, but take the time. Like if there's a research study available, my strong advice is take the time to find out about it. It might not be right for you. It might not be something you want to do, but learn about it and figure out whether it's something that sounds right for you.
No, perfect. Thank you for that insight. I'm going to ask Shannon and John very quickly just your experience with any clinical research and even what that conversation was like with your care team, and then we'll hand it over to the room for Q&As.
Okay, I'll try to be brief. After my stem cell transplant, my stem cell transplant doctor referred me for a clinical trial, and I started that one in 2018. And then by February 2020, that clinical trial failed me, and I had a relapse. This was right before COVID started. And just based on the new prognosis, Dr. Zonder recommended the clinical trial that I'm in now. And so I've been in this clinical trial since the spring of 2020, and it has been phenomenal. I'm doing very well in it, and honestly, I just trust anything Dr. Zonder says. So whatever he refers me to do, I really will do it. I mean, look him up, guys. Google him. He's quite amazing. And seriously, he's renowned. And so I really do trust him. And he's blushing. I trust him. I trust him. And so again, I'm in a long-term clinical trial. And I remember when I started this one, I don't know if I was some months in, and I'm like, well, so how long is this one? You know, how long am I going to be in this? He was like, there's no end date. I didn't know. I didn't realize that. I thought that I'm in a clinical trial for a certain amount of time. There is no end date. And so, go ahead, Dr. Zender.
Then that varies trial to trial. There are some trials where the trial is, we're going to do 2 years of therapy or 1 year of therapy. And there are some trials that are, especially for people whose myeloma has been treated previously and they're getting second-line therapy or beyond that, there are a lot of trials where it's open-ended. Like, as long as it's working and you're tolerating it and you want to keep participating and it makes sense, you can.
Yeah.
So, you know, that varies according to trial. There are trials where I'll tell a patient, you know, this trial is like up to 12 cycles of therapy or up to 6 months of therapy, and then after that, this is what we would do once we get there. And I try and, you know, sort of project out what would the plan be after completion of the trial if there's a completion date.
Yeah, and so this is long term, and quite honestly, I'm in what Dr. Zonder would say is full response, but I'm kind of scared to not be in it. I don't want it to come back. You know, of course I stand on faith, but I also appreciate, you know, medical intervention. So it's long term, and I do appreciate the opportunity to participate in it.
Well, thank you.
So I think with clinical trials, it's important to realize that not everybody qualifies for them, right? They may have a clinical trial, but you just are not going to qualify. So you have to kind of figure out where your health is at the time, what the objectives are of the trial. For me, every time that there was a clinical trial that was available through Carmanos, I didn't qualify. I had issues that just didn't qualify for it. The one thing that I do want to say when it comes to clinical trials are our own health. We have to take our own health in our own hands, right? We have wonderful systems, but we need to make sure that we're getting the care that we want. And I think it goes back to, you know, your doctor. Do you feel that doctor is looking at you as a human being and not as a number, not as a patient that is just thrown through the clinic? So get to know your doctor, get to know the support people. I think Shannon and I have a family over at Carmanos that with the nurses and all the people that take care of us there. So just take that into your own hands. Ask your doctor about clinical trials. Stay up on it. There's a lot of, you know, the MMRF is a great resource of where things are in myeloma. So just take it into your own hands. And Shannon's a perfect example. She jokes about her being Dr. Zonder's favorite. She is Dr. Zonder's favorite. I know that because I've been trying to become his favorite for a long time, and he told me the other day, he said, just give it up, John. It ain't never gonna happen. Okay, Shannon's my number one. And I met her today for the first time, and I get it.
Now,
Can I just say one more thing? This is about the earlier question about our network. I just want to say that it's really important to have someone who's an advocate for you also, because there are times where this journey can become so overwhelming that I can't keep it all in place. I can't remember everything. And so I had a lot of people in my immediate circle. I had one particular friend who She took all the notes. She remembered everything. It just becomes quite overwhelming. So to have someone, her name is Rihanna. She couldn't be here today. She may be watching, but I just want to acknowledge that she was clutch for me. So I just want to say, having a patient advocate, if you have someone in your life who is dealing with a diagnosis, if you can be that person for that person who is going through, be that person. It's very critical.
So I just, and Shannon, that if you remember anything today, remember how important caregivers are and how important being a caregiver is for the people in our lives. And without a caregiver to be able to help you through these really difficult conversations that Dr. Zonder talked about, it becomes overwhelming for everybody. So cheers to caregivers. You are lifesavers. So.
Yeah, I think bringing somebody to an appointment with you, if you have somebody to bring, is generally helpful. So you can, even on the way home, just like debrief, right? Like, what did we hear today? Also, I think that people should feel free to ask their docs if they can record the appointment. I don't really ever hesitate about that. I mean, if you want to record your appointment so you can listen to it later and just, refresh your memory about what you heard and hear it again when you're not feeling maybe wound up, I think that's a good idea.
No, wonderful. Thank you to all of our panelists. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you all very much. Fantastic information, great pointers. Just very quickly, I'm going to add my 2 cents. Something that we've heard a lot today is ask questions, have conversations, seek opinions, talk to other HCPs. And I always say, if you go in for your visit and there's just a lot going on, we do have organizations and resources like the MMRF. We have a patient navigation center where folks will call us and say, okay, I just came from my doctor's office, what kind of questions should I ask? Or they said this, what did that mean? So you also have resources with organizations like the MMRF where you can actually call and just, okay, help me break down this information so I can actually understand what took place. But with that, we will open it up for Q&As. If anyone has questions for our panelists this morning. And Wynn will be walking around with a microphone, so please speak into the microphone. Just raise your hand.
Hello. I was diagnosed with multiple myeloma last March, and I had never had an issue with anything. But this question goes out to Shannon. You mentioned about supplemental insurance, and at this point, it's really hard for me to get any type of insurance because of my diagnosis. So my question to you is, the supplemental insurance that you spoke upon, was this before your diagnosis?
Yes, fortunately for me, and I'm sorry that you didn't have a chance to do this beforehand. So yes, like I said, I have a friend who sells supplemental insurance, and she turned me onto it many years ago, and so I've had it for quite a long time. Just in case. And I see it so often. So many of us, particularly in the Black community, do not have supplemental insurances, and it is so critical. Life insurance policies, of course, that's a given. But again, like I said, I also have a disability policy. I have an accidental policy. That's accident for me, for myself, and for my children. That means if I do something and have to get stitches in my eye, I can get, hospital or disability check just because I got stitches in my eye. I just have, and it's not very expensive to get it. You know what I mean? It's just something that I have had for many years, disability, critical illness, and now and I still have my critical illness policy, but because I've already used it for a cancer diagnosis, I don't think that I could use it for a second cancer diagnosis, and maybe not a recurrence, but maybe a different cancer. But it's also for heart attack, stroke. I mean, any kind of critical illness that I may be diagnosed with, I have a policy that will, make sure I can pay my bills for the next year. So I just would really, really recommend everybody, if you can, get supplemental insurance.
And I did get like long-term disability through my employer because they automatically paid for short-term. So I got long-term. But I guess my only question is, did you get any type of supplemental insurance after your diagnosis?
Did I open any
what
new
was it?
policies after? No, I had all of these policies before. Let me see. I'm trying to think. Did I get? I think maybe I might have gotten. No, I had them all before. I did.
And the last question I wanted to ask was who were you up under for the medicinal products that you used?
Okay. Yep. I'll share that with you. I won't put it on the on the microphone, but I'll share it with you when I leave here.
I am a
when we
patient
get
at
off.
U of M.
Okay.
And the pain management doctor that I have, she did mention to be up under her care, but she didn't give me any recommendations of who to reach out to, and I didn't want to reach out on my own.
Okay.
So I would appreciate
Yes, I
that
will.
share.
Okay.
Thank you.
And no, thank you for your question, ma'am. And sorry to hear about your diagnosis, but hopefully, just meeting our panelists here today will provide some additional information. I do want to say, for patients who are, trying to figure out how to cover costs and expenses related to their diagnosis, again, reaching out to the MMRF, we do have links to foundations and organizations that can help alleviate some of those costs. So we can share some information with you, and we give several grants to other organizations that provide those kinds of assistance. So, yeah.
So I just wanted to address that. This is a very expensive disease to treat, okay? The chemotherapies that I'm on are about $75,000+ a month. And it is very difficult to maneuver, for me anyway, our medical system that we have here in this country. It's easy to give up. It really is when somebody tells you something that is not the news you want to hear, and you just think that that's the way that it is, and you can give up. And I'm here to tell you, don't give up. Don't ever give up. I don't pay a penny for my chemotherapies. There's no reason that you have to as well, from the standpoint of getting to know where the money is in the foundations, and the way to do it is through the MMRF. It's through some people that we have, Carmanos has, to go out and get money. Now there's costs, certainly pay, right? We have all of our deductibles, and it's more than what we want. But don't give up. When you get an answer that you don't like about how much it's going to cost you, go somewhere else. Okay, get to know the MMRF. I mean, that if you have one resource before you leave here, write their number down, get to know the people, and they can help you out. There's people that care to make sure you get your treatment. It's our job as patients and caregivers to find those people, and it's getting easier and easier, I think, now with the expansion of that type of service at MMRF, and even at Carmanos too. So there's great people there that help us. So.
Yeah. Can y'all hear me? Okay. I apologize. I know that there's a lot of great questions in the crowd, but we are at time for this particular session. I know most of our panelists can stay, so please feel free to network with each other and ask follow-up questions. But we are going to transition to a brief break. And before that, let's make sure to clap it up for this first session here.
Wow, what a great turnout. My name is Jen Rogers. I've been at the MMRF for 10 years next month. And I'm here at the MMRF because my father was a myeloma patient. And I have personally experienced and seen what this disease was for him and for my mother as a caregiver. So this has a very personal meaning for me. And I'm so so glad you're all here to share this and learn a little bit more about the disease. I'd love to welcome our panel. Ladies, please join us. This is Ellen Dillard, a nurse practitioner at Hermanos, and Odie. Is a myeloma thriver. So everybody please give them a round of applause and welcome them. Omi, I'd like to start with you. I understand you've had a long journey in getting your myeloma diagnosis. Can you share with us what it has been like and what all's involved?
Sure, I'm glad to. Good morning, and again, thank you for this opportunity. As she said, that I am Omi Anderson Smith. I reside currently in Saginaw, Michigan. I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm an educator, I'm in elementary education. And as she said, I just told them they said everything already, so we'll do our best. But I was diagnosed October 6, 2 days before my 60th birthday. Went to my regular yearly physicals, and I tell everyone you don't have a complete physical if your doctor is not taking your blood work. He needs to do blood work, and there should be a panel of items that he's looking for in your system, and that's what my doctor did in Saginaw. And I do it, we do it routinely, not thinking anything about it, just to say, okay, I did it. But I got a call saying, okay, Dr. Linus wants you to redo your blood work. And I'm thinking, did you guys lose it, or what's the problem? Still thinking it's something on their end. And she said, well, he's just concerned about something that he saw. I'm like, okay, tell me what he saw. I'm getting a little nervous here. And they mentioned protein. Well, when you hear protein, you're thinking of, okay, I need to eat more of this, eat more meat, I need to eat more of this and that. At the time, I was on a Mediterranean diet, which means I was not eating a lot of meat. Every now and then, I would eat fish, but a lot of fruits and vegetables. So I'm still thinking, when I heard the word protein, that, okay, I just need to eat more meat. So I'm good. I'll go eat some meat, go take my blood work, everything's fine. I took the blood work. She called me back a few days later, and she said, he doesn't want you to get alarmed. And by then I'm thinking, okay, I'm getting alarmed. What is it? And he wants you to see an oncologist. And we all know what that word means. And I got very nervous. At the time, my husband's mother, my mother-in-law, had just passed away. We were leaving in a few days to go to Louisiana for the funeral. So I didn't mention it to him. I didn't mention it to anyone in my family. We got back. I did see Dr. Lou, in oncologist, very well known in the area. I went to see her, and I did tell my husband at that time, because she wanted to do a bone marrow biopsy. And I'm like, okay, I've heard of that, but what is that? And of course, as Dr. Zahner mentioned earlier, they go in the pelvic area. It's very painful. You need to make sure, if you ever do it, get that anesthesia. And they take out a slither of your bone and some of the fluid from your marrow, and they check for any abnormal plasma cells. And she wasn't sure at that time if she was seeing anything or not. It was questionable. And she said, we can do two things. You can watch it, come back in 6 months, or you want to get a second opinion. I'm okay with that. And I love doctors that don't mind, as Dr. Zahner said, get a second opinion, because we know some doctors will not honor that or suggest that, but she did. I said, I want a second opinion, and I want one of the best. I don't care where I have to go. And so she asked, did I have any cancer in my family? Because a lot of people ask, is it hereditary? I have never heard of it, multiple myeloma before, and I said no. But my mother did have colon cancer, and she said, okay, it's not related. I wanted a second opinion. She sent me to Dr. Emmett Cole. At the time, he was at U of M Medical Center, very well known. He's renowned, as Dr. Zahner is. And so I went to him. I prayed about it. As Shannon said earlier, I am also a Christian, and I'm a believer that God directs your paths. And he directed me to Dr. Cole. And as she said, he's family to this day. That was in 2014. And so I went to him in October 2014. And I walked in and I said, oh, wow, he's African-American. Look at God. So I was so excited. He's a nerd, but I love him dearly. He's been a blessing to myself and any other patients I've sent to him for other opinions. And he later on transferred to Carmanas in Lansing, and he's still there 1 day a week, but now he just transferred in July. He's back here at Carmanas in Detroit, which he's thoroughly enjoying it, he said. But I still travel to see him, and a lot of people ask me, why do you go to Dr. Linus when they have oncologists and hematologists in Saginaw? It's because God led me to him, number one. And number two, I trust him. In the African American community, I found that a lot of times we don't trust physicians. We don't trust doctors. I see a lot of nods, and you know that's just the way it's been in our history of African Americans. They don't trust, like some people don't trust banks. They keep their money at home. I know we don't do that anymore, but some of us do not trust doctors. I trust him thoroughly. As Shannon says, she trusts Dr. Zunder with her life. I do the same with Dr. Cole. If he tells me to do this, this, and this, then I will do it. So I went to him and he said, okay, we're going to monitor you once a month. And I'm like, once a month? I'm a teacher. That means I have to take off every month to go to the doctor. So I'm thinking of, okay, I'm gonna run out of, not gonna have any days left. I'm thinking about financial, I'm thinking everything, you know. But then God said, I got you. Trust me and trust him. I sent you to him, you're gonna be okay. Fast forward, I went every Monday for treatment. Well, not treatment, I'm sorry. He monitored me. Dr. Cole would always, and I meant to bring a few to show you and I didn't, but I can send them to you if you want me to. But he would always draw me diagrams. That helped me a lot. Because at first he diagnosed me with MGUST. That means that there's something there, but they're not sure what. They're just gonna keep an eye on it. And then later on, I was diagnosed, and maybe a couple of years later, with smoldering myeloma. That means that there's indication that their plasma cells may be cancerous, and they gotta watch them closer. So I thought at times where I could, okay, doc, my blood work looked good for me. That's what I used to always say, for me. So can I do like 3 months, see you in 3 months? And every time he was about to do as I asked, my numbers would be all over the place again. And I'm like, oh man. So he said, no, I got to keep you on every month. So I did that for a few years actually. And then I would go to every other month. And then I would go to 3 months, but I would never go past that third month. And that was the scary part. But he told me once, he said, normally, if I monitor someone for about 5 years and the numbers look as yours do, they're out of the woods. So I'm thinking, okay, let me get past that 5th year. Got to the 5th year, it started going crazy again, up and down, just this was good, that was bad, you know. So I'm like, okay, but I never thought that I would be diagnosed. So I fast forward October 2022, 2 days before my birthday, October 8th, my 60th, I got a call. I had been in that Monday for blood work, and they're really good in Lansing. They would call me and say, I know you're waiting on those last 3, because I would get the full panel that day. He would print them out, give it to me, we go over it. He draws little diagrams, what it means. And then the 3 that I have to wait on lab results take about 3 days. So she called me and she said, I'll never forget, I was sitting at work, and she said, can you do a phone call with Dr. Cole, a Zoom? And I'm thinking, yeah. I said, give me a minute. Let me get someone to cover my class. And I did. And I called my husband and told him, and he came over, and we went and sit in the car, and I Zoomed. And I'm getting nervous then, because this never happens. Because she called, and then she said, Dr. Cole wants to see you. When can you come in? And that was like a Tuesday. I said, well, I'm leaving to go to Miami Friday for my birthday. What's going on? And she's like, oh, no, it can wait till you get back. He said, don't worry. I said, look, I think it was Jennifer. I said, Jennifer, what's going on? Because you get to know them by name and everything at this point. And she said, well, I said, Jennifer, no, get me in. So they got me in on Thursday, and he told me that he had concerns. He showed me my labs work, my protein. I forgot how many thousands it was at the time. And he said, I said, well, doc, this is what I want you to tell me. If it was your sister, your mother, or your child, your daughter, what would you do? He said, I would treat it. I said, well, okay, we're going to treat it. And that was the hardest decision for me, but it gave me comfort in knowing that I trusted him. And if he told me to do it, I would do it. Because if he would do it for his wife or his mother or his daughter, then I needed to do it. So I prayed about it, and I started October 17th with treatment. And fast forward, I'm not going to sit here and say treatment was easy. I'm not going to say there wasn't any symptoms, but I didn't have any symptoms. And I know a lot of people said they did. A friend of mine in Nashville had a lot of back pain, and she too was misdiagnosed. They kept telling her she had sprained her back or a muscle. It was an ER doctor that told her, no, you need to get tested for multiple myeloma. So listen to your body, be your best advocate. But I did do treatment, and I did have, he did recommend me to Dr. Ayash here at Carmanas. I had my bone marrow, my stem cell transplant using my own cells here. And I was just telling Shannon that the challenging thing about the multiple myeloma stem cell transplant, some people opt out not to do it. I do recommend it, but every patient is different. Every journey is different. If you've probably heard the journeys up here earlier, we all in the room could tell our journeys, but they're all going to be different. And as Dr. said earlier, they have to determine, okay, how to treat this person versus this patient, because we're all different. But it was very challenging to be in the hospital for 16, 17 days for me. I'm on the go. I'm always going. And for me to have to stop and sit, I told them every night I was breaking out. I said, I'm escaping. I'm getting out of here. But they would make us walk 2 or 3 times a day. We had to walk. So at night when I would walk, they would watch me. They said, okay, the alarm's going to go off. But I still go by to see them. I actually, one of them actually texted me yesterday for the link. So if you're watching, thank you. They kept me sane in that hospital. So I can't sit here and say it's been an easy journey, but I found that this journey is not just for me. This journey is not for me. It's to help other people. And that's why we're all here today. But I don't know why God is putting us through this except to help someone else. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. And we have to be advocates for each other and for ourselves.
First of all, I want to give you an early happy birthday for a few days. I hope this one you're in better spirits than the one on your 60th. Ellen, I return to you. Now, Omi did a great job bringing up MGUS and smoldering. Could you kind of explain that a little bit to our audience and tell us through what you go through? We see so many patients at different stages and different places in their life. How do you help them navigate this from MGUS to the diagnosis?
Hi, my name is Ellen Dillard. I am a nurse practitioner at Carmanos Cancer Institute. I work alongside with Dr. Zonder, Dr. Cole, and Dr. Ayash in our clinic. So we both have our malignant hematology and our bone marrow transplant as part of the Dresner Clinic at Carmanos. To just touch base briefly on MGUS versus smoldering versus myeloma. So asking questions when you are diagnosed about what stage you are, because MGUS generally we monitor. If you then go into smoldering myeloma, again, as Omi said, you do need to be monitored a little bit more closely, but may not need treatment quite yet. If you then are proceeding into multiple myeloma, that usually is indication whether you have a certain amount of plasma cells located in your blood, your labs are off a little bit, you just may require actual chemotherapy or immunotherapy, or proceeding to transplant, for instance. First, I like to encourage patients in general, as you mentioned, to be their own advocate. Your story is very similar to a lot of other stories of patients with multiple myeloma, whether or not they had a pain, they went to the regular doctor, there was something abnormal with their lab, they needed more investigation. I always tell patients to advocate. The squeaky wheel gets the oil. So if something is not going well, you're having pain, something's not being addressed, you need to advocate for yourself. You need to make sure that you're getting the answers that you require, whether it's from your healthcare provider or the hospital system that you're at. Because a lot of times there is no specific test that's going to diagnose multiple myeloma early, for one. Next, moving forward, once you do get that diagnosis, coming to a treatment center that specializes in multiple myeloma, such as Carmanos. I was talking to somebody else, and we are fortunate in Michigan that there are several places that do treat oncology, specifically myeloma, and that we have opportunities for transplant, CAR T-cell therapy, clinical trials. So I always encourage patients to not only ask more in depth about their diagnosis, what stage they are, what are the treatments going to look like, how are we going to manage this disease with either chemotherapy, what are potential side effects. Also, as earlier in the panel, just communicating what are some of the financial aspects, what does my schedule look like, that way in case you need to take time off of work, and just talk to your provider about all of these concerns. We learn to treat the whole person, not just the disease. So we need to know, what are your goals in life, events that you need to get to, vacations, because with myeloma, it's not a death sentence. It is a part of your journey and your life story. And for us as providers, we want to make sure that we work together as a team to make sure that we get you to those events that you need to get to. We understand that people need to work. They need to continue to pay their bills and have insurance. And we do our best to make sure that we come together as a team and treat you that works best for you, regardless of what treatments are out there. Because not everybody wants to go through transplant. Not everybody wants to go through CAR T-cell. Some people don't want to continue on treatment, or they don't want certain treatments or chemotherapy depending on the schedule. So we try to work together as a team, really.
With my father's diagnosis, he was one of the worst playing golf. We had to leave in the middle of a game to my dad because of the pain. And he went to the doctor and got steroid injections. He later came back. So and then that's when he had his x-rays and they showed the lesions in his bone. We then pursued treatment as Ellen was saying, one of my specialists that can focus on myeloma. And the closest for us who are from Louisiana was in Little Rock. Where this is the clinical trial. And so I'm going to ask, what are your thoughts on this?
I personally did not do the clinical trial. Dr. Cole did offer it, as I heard someone earlier say that it wasn't offered to them, but he did offer it earlier on, I think when I was in smoldering myeloma. And I was telling Shannon earlier, I don't think I knew enough about it at the time, even though he knew I like to research everything. So he gave me a stack to read. He gave me the websites to go to, and I did read it, but I think I had that fear. I think mine was more fear. And whether that's as an African American, I'm not sure, but I had that fear that, okay, I don't want to do anything to my body that I don't have to. Because when you hear cancer, you think of chemo automatically and what it does to your body. You're going to lose your hair, you're going to lose weight, you're going to do this and that. And I think I had that fear. Hindsight, if I could do it all over again, I would do the clinical trial. And the reason I would is because I see it now as I've talked to others that have done it, and as I've researched, that it gives you that cutting edge of the medications that are out there now. 20 years ago, we don't have the percentage or survival rate for African Americans as we do now. And that's a blessing because they are doctors and researchers and scientists, biologists. They are currently and actively every day. That's why we have to make sure we continue to do the marches and the fundraising to get money, as they do with breast cancer and all these other cancers, to find the money for the cure, because they are working daily to get these medications, new medications that are working for their clinical trial patients, approved by the FDA. And that's very, very critical too. We have to make sure that what we're taking and putting in our bodies is certified by and approved by the FDA. But if I could do it all over, I would, because I feel that I might not be where I am now had I done the clinical trials and got the medications and the treatments. And along the way, I would have been also helping others. And I sort of regret that in a way, but then I look at it as God put me on this journey for a reason. And But if I had the opportunity, as I know Shannon had the opportunity after her stem cell transplant, so if I ever have that opportunity for whatever given reason, yes, I would do it for that reason, because I want to be informed, and I want to know that I want to know of any new research. I know Dr. Cole told me that they're waiting now, I think in October, there's a new research coming out about a trial they've been doing recently for the last few months. And he said in October, because I'm trying not to do my maintenance drugs every day. And he's like, hold it, hold it, hold it. He and Dr. Ayash are like, wait on me, wait, you got to stay on it. I said, well, let me know in October what the research says, and we'll take it from there. So I'm being obedient right now. And as I said, there are side effects in all of them. There are, but I think the clinical trials not only helps you, but it helps others. It's sort of like you're trying it out it's like you're trying out a car before you buy it for someone else. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So first, I just like to reiterate, ask questions. Ask as many questions as you can think of. If you have an appointment coming up, write them down, bring them with you, especially when it comes to just treatment in general. With clinical trials, there is a lot of misconception that it's potentially a treatment versus like a placebo or like a sugar pill. Most clinical trials nowadays, there are different phases with clinical trials, but everybody gets some form of treatment. It may be, for instance, standard of care with myeloma patients versus the newest treatment or something that they're trying to compare to. But you're going to get treatment regardless. Asking questions from your provider. Usually there's a research team, so research nurses that are involved to understand the ins and outs of whatever clinical trial that they are trying to offer you. And again, as I mentioned, we are lucky in Michigan with facilities like Carmano's who do offer clinical trials. There are some other places and locations that may not offer them. And not only is it new advancements in treatment, just within the last 10 years that I've worked in oncology, we've had so many great advancements just within the myeloma space, so that people can live longer. And a lot of that advancement is related to those who participate in clinical trials, especially in the African American community. We need more participation so that we can understand how myeloma affects our community and affects our body specifically, because it is different compared to Hispanic counterparts, Caucasian counterparts. A lot of patients in the Black community tend to be, excuse me, diagnosed later. It takes more time for them to get to novel treatments. They may not be offered some of the newest treatments that are available due to access to healthcare. So if you are in a location, I would definitely consider it. One of the reasons, or one of the ways that I walk my patients through it is, obviously we discuss the clinical trial. They do meet with their research staff that gives them usually a consent. So read through that consent. If you have questions regarding that consent, you absolutely can ask and make sure that you understand the ins and outs. Because with clinical trials, there may be extra appointments involved, extra labs, extra procedures. So you do want to have a full understanding of what you're signing up for. And again, not only to help yourself, but to potentially help somebody else in the future with myeloma. Maybe it's a friend or a family member, but just for us to have more information about how to treat it in our community. Just mentioned that with clinical trials, you can always stop. You can always say, I don't want to do this anymore. You always have that option with whatever care in healthcare. You always have the option to say, I don't want to do this anymore.
As newly diagnosed, when you said those, when you mentioned the consent forms, I remember those that stacked. So that might be another reason I didn't do it. So, but first of all, I would say stay positive. That is a key. Stay positive. Get a great support group. I know someone mentioned earlier they had great support. It's very important. But I have met multiple myeloma patients that don't have a lot of support. So as someone said earlier, now I think John said, now we have each other. We're meeting more and more as we do panels, or I'm on 2 support groups online on Zoom, and that helps as well. And you get to know each other, you get to support each other, exchange phone numbers, addresses, things, and you just, but you start supporting each other. And that's key. I had a lot of support. I was blessed to have a lot of support. Thank you. I was blessed. I am blessed rather to have a lot of support, not only from my immediate family, but also from my church family, the Mount Olive Church in Saginaw. And also, I have a few friends that showed up today from the Triumph Church. Thank you for coming. I still stay in touch with my nurses here at Carmanas, my nurses in Lansing, my sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, the Pink and Green ladies, yes. So I have support from them. My support, I'm originally from Louisiana. I have support there. I have support from where I relocated from Nashville. I mean, the day that my last day of school was in 2023, before my transplant. I walked in, and the staff and faculty and principal, they all had T-shirts saying, support squad. They made me this shirt, and it was overwhelming. They had a breakfast for me that morning. My husband was in on it, of course, and it was just amazing. I cried. I mean, just to have that support before I go through a scary thing such as a stem cell transplant. And the day that I had my actual transplant that morning, they sent me a picture of where they had these bracelets on, and they had all crossed their hands, and they sent that to me with a prayer. And it's just moments like that that you say, okay, I got this. I can do this. So if you're ever in a moment, in a place, or you know someone that's in a place where they feel they're alone, please reach out to us, reach out to one of them. They would put them in contact with support groups because they're out there. As she said, a lot of times you've got to be your own advocate. You got to do your research and realize what's out there for you. I've called the Multiple Myeloma Foundation initially when I didn't have all that other outside support. I didn't know about it, and they would tell me who to contact. They're very, very efficient of doing that. I would also say, if you need to cry, cry. If you need to scream, scream. If you need to have those moments, do it. There's nothing wrong with that, but don't stay there long, because don't let it define you. As she said earlier, and Shannon said, it's not a death sentence. I had to tell my students that. I had to tell my 5th grade class while I was leaving after spring break and wouldn't come back the rest of the year. And that was the hardest thing in education I've ever had to do. But I had to, and when they hear the C words, because a lot of them have been through so many deaths of their own in their families, they automatically think, oh, Miss Smith is dying. Miss Smith's not coming back. And so you have to let them know that all cancers are not a death sentence. One of my sorority sisters is a clinical biologist, and when I was diagnosed, she called me and she said, if I could have any cancer, I would want that one. I was like, are you crazy? Why? She said, there's not a cure, but it's manageable. And I felt better. I'm like, okay, I can do this. I can do this. So I just want to say, be true to yourself. It's okay to have a bad day. Just don't stay there long. Stay positive. Surround yourself with positive people, not negative. You may lose some people along the way, and that's okay. Those are the ones you didn't need in your life in the first place. But you do need support. When we go through the stem cell transplant, you have to have 2 caregivers.
They were the only two that could come to the hospital. They were the two that had to be on the documentation. They had to go through the class with us, and they had to know do's and don'ts. The hardest thing I would say for me that might have been my depression was when I had to go home from the stem cell transplant. I was discharged, and you can't be around anyone for like the first 100 days. I couldn't see my grandkids except by Zoom. They would come by the house. I would see them outside. They would drop off food or whatever. That was very difficult for me. And that was a little depression there. But thank God it was summertime, so I could sit outside, etc. But I just want to say that in the African American community, as she said, that it's rising. I've heard people contact me and say, okay, I didn't know about it till I heard about you, but my sister has it, or my uncle has it, or my coworker has it. Can they call you? It's rising in the African American community. They still do not know why. So we have to be our own advocates. We have to educate not only ourselves, but as you leave here today, you should go out and tell others, because they may dismiss it at first, but I guarantee you in another year or so, we're all going to know somebody that has it. But it's up to us to pray and find a cure for it. And if it's anything that any of us can do to advocate for any of you or to support you, that's what it's about. Because as I said earlier, it's not about us. It's about helping others. This journey is not just about us. So if there's anything we can do, let's do it, not just for the African American community, but just for this disease. Because one of my daughters, where is she? Ashley and I, our flight was just canceled. So we're not leaving at 7 o'clock to go to Atlanta this evening. So we had to find another flight because of the hurricane. But one of my daughters in Atlanta is a pediatrician. Even though I think I know more about the disease than she does, she stays on me. She stays on me. And my other daughter was my note taker, Mackenzie. She's the baby, and she would get on the call. And as someone said earlier, I think Dr. Zandra said, when you go to your appointments, I would record it for them because they wanted to know every detail by the time I got in the car. And you don't remember all of that. I did go with my notes. I had a list. Doc already knew when he come in, just sit down, because I have a whole list of questions, and he would answer them one by one, and I would just put my phone down and just let him. Our whole conversation was recorded, and I would send that to them. And I also listened to it later myself, because sometimes you're there and you forget later on, like, what did he say about or you look at the report and you're like, okay, why is this high? He didn't say anything about this. And then you listen to your recording. That really helped me a lot. Our daughter Mackenzie is an Atlanta Falcon football cheerleader. So that's why I was trying to go see my New Orleans Saints this weekend, but pray for me. But she, last year on my birthday, it was the Cancer Awareness Day. And of course, you see all this pink everywhere. So I had to wear my burgundy, and they surprised me, and they had the cancer awareness, but it was burgundy ribbon. So we just have to get it out there that not all cancers are pink. My sister had breast cancer, so I understand that. That's one of my dear diseases that I advocate for as well. But we have to get it out there that burgundy matters also. And there's so many other cancers to fight for. But again, to stay positive, be true to yourself, advocate for yourself. If you don't like the first opinion, get a second. If you don't feel comfortable with the second opinion, get a third. But do what you have to do for you.
Recording the sessions, I know it's so hard retaining when you hear so much and you're already in a doctor's office, you're already a little bit nervous. It's hard to remember all of that. So those are great examples. I also want to amplify something that Shannon said, and the first panelists have already gone up to you, so thank you for bringing this up. It's supplemental insurance. My father and my mom, she's a little 5'3" woman. My dad's this big, 6'2", 200+ man. And she had to have a caregiver sometimes help, especially after he had some surgeries. And that supplemental insurance allowed her to have somebody there in the house helping. It also is not just with cancer, but later my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, so it's helping cover her Alzheimer's care. So these supplemental insurance policies can be just a few dollars, but it can be so much help later on. So thank you again, Shannon, for bringing up that very important point. And well, I want to turn to you now. How do you help patients like Omi, like my father? How do you help them find the resources they need in navigating through this, whether it's clinical trials or just finding support, myeloma mentors, or what do you tell your patients as they go through this?
Yeah. So definitely asking questions, telling us the full story. What are your goals? What does your support look like? We kind of need to know all aspects of your life and what kind of support you have so that we can direct you to other resources. For Carmanos itself, so we have, when it comes to clinical trials, obviously you have your provider, you may have someone like me, a nurse practitioner that also works with you, nursing staff. We are all resources for you. So if we understand maybe you have issues with getting a ride on certain days, we can try to work with our social workers to assist if there's financial. There are tons of programs and grants that are available that we can help you apply for. John mentioned when it comes to chemotherapy, cost, finances, we have resources. Our pharmacy works with patients to find grants to pay for these medications. Even before you meet your deductible. So there are resources available, but we need to know that information in order to find the right resources for you. As far as navigating other support, we have a great social work team that can help get you in connection with other myeloma specific support groups or other cancer support groups, but also, like Omi said, doing the research yourself and looking at institutions like the Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation offer support as well. A lot of the pharmaceutical companies have patient navigators and other supports that are provided through them, through some of these drugs and medications that you may be taking. They also offer grants to cover medications as well, but really just use all your resources that you can, ask questions, make sure that you educate yourself, and just know that we are all here to help you as part of your journey. And as Omi mentioned, if you don't like the answer or potentially your provider, it's okay to get a second opinion. It's okay. I tell my patients all the time, it's okay to shop around and find someone that you can trust as your healthcare provider, because we're people too. And I consider all my patients like family. They know me personally. They know things that are going on in my life. And I would expect the same thing from my provider as well. So, but ask questions, educate yourself, and then really talk to your providers and your healthcare team about what you need. And there are resources available for you.
I would like to know why is it this disease is so prevalent in the Black community, and this is my first time hearing about it.
So it's prevalent because, for one, unlike breast cancer, there is no one specific test to test for it early. It can contribute because there's other comorbidities in the Black community, such as diabetes. So a lot of times there can be a delay in treatment. There's also other disparities within the Black community, such as mistrust in your healthcare provider, access to healthcare. Also encouraging patients to seek medical attention. Most African Americans, even though they may be diagnosed later or receive treatment later, most people do very well. Most of them are what we call standard risk. And if you take out all of those disparities, disparities within the Black community, they tend to do just as well as, they tend to do just as well as Caucasians or Hispanics, as long as they take out, they have access to healthcare, they can get novel treatments or standard treatments. So it's just a matter of bringing awareness. I also encourage all of my patients in the Black community or not, that you need to have a primary care provider. You need to have routine follow-up. You need to make sure that you're addressing your healthcare needs, whether it's just an annual physical, maybe routine blood work, because as I mentioned before, a lot of these stories are very similar. People have a pain, back pain, for instance, they may fracture a bone. Some people have some issues with their kidneys. Something that may not be obvious to your primary care provider, or if you would go into an ER. But you need routine follow-up to know what is your baseline. But again, making sure that if there is something that's going on, that you address it. Because a lot of patients are misdiagnosed or delayed in their diagnosis for multiple myeloma.
And also, I would like to piggyback on what Ella was saying, is that I was on a Zoom call a few months ago for a panel, and two of the doctors were from Mississippi and one from LA. And it was an eye-opener for me when I realized that a lot of the patients they were finding were in rural areas, and some of those patients probably had had multiple myeloma for years and didn't know. Because as she said, they may not trust the doctor to go every year. They just go when they need to go, which may be years at a time. And a lot of them was social economic reasons. It could be poverty. A lot of them was lack of electronics as far as computers or iPads or whatever. So they too had never heard of it. And I think a lot of that plays a big part, not being educated in the Black community of what this is. So give yourselves applause for being here today and spreading that word. When I was diagnosed, I could see when I as First Lady, I got up that Sunday and I wanted to share. I wanted to be open. I know some others in the area that have had it and they didn't say anything. That's their prerogative. Some people want to keep it a secret. They want to deal with it without anyone knowing for whatever reason. That's okay. But I prayed about it, and that's okay. If God gave me this, I need to share it and help someone else. Especially when I realized that in the African American community, it was rising, male and female, and we're getting it younger. Dr. Cole was telling me that normally it was about around 70 years old, but we're getting it younger and younger, as you see with Shannon at 41, I think. So there's no age group anymore. There's no, it's not necessarily hereditary, but you can do some genetic testing. I told my children, they asked me about that. So I just think that a lot of times it's just not getting educated, not knowing that it's there until it happens. And I think that some people may even die with it, not knowing or being misdiagnosed with it for all those years, not knowing what it really was or what it really is. So one thing that those doctors are doing in Mississippi and LA that was on the conference, they're trying to get out to those areas and crash and crash that fear of what's wrong with me or ignoring it. You know how sometimes we ignore the fact, okay, my back's been hurting for 6 months. It's just, it's just arthritis or whatever. So I think it's a combination of things. But as I said, when I was diagnosed, a lot of people had never heard of it. A few people had, but most people hadn't. So it's just getting it out there now that we know. When we know better, we do better.
Hi. So I wanted to know, are there two questions? Are there any preventative measures that we should be taking to prevent it? And also, can you provide some early on symptoms just to be aware of things that you could look for if you're having a problem before,
yearly blood work, whether it be, chemistry panel, your blood counts, because some patients decreased blood counts because of myeloma, kidney dysfunction, but you don't get into labs really unless they have physical symptoms such as back pain, a fracture of bone. So having the one of the biological is always key, because a lot of patients don't have a primary care provider and they may go to like an urgent care, and you're not going to get the same continuity of care by going to urgent care or an ER, when you go to a primary care provider who follows you, who knows your health, who knows your history, who knows your family characteristics, who know your children, your parents, and whatnot. So having that continuity of care is really important, and it's something that you can call your nurse or your labs or just overall health reports. Some early symptoms, like some people are very asymptomatic. You mentioned feeling like back pain, hip pain, generalized only aches. And definitely these pains don't go away. I always tell patients a lot of times they will have presence of lesion. They can have a pinpoint where that pain is. Some other people will have things like difficulties with fatigue, but then they remain fatigued. That could be from their blood counts being low. Some people can get infections. There is a wide range of symptoms, but generally you can get pain, dietary abnormalities, kidneys, weight loss, fatigue.
I'm glad that you guys said that. My doctor just sent me to get blood work done, and I didn't, but I am. I'm going to go. Uh, and I have been experiencing some pain with my right side. I haven't mentioned it to him. It's only when I sit down, though, and I'm literally going to follow up on my blood work. But is there something specific, like I should be making sure that he looks for? Or is it like or is it just routine blood work? Or
Generally routine blood work. If something, for instance, comes back abnormal, if the doctor needs additional blood work, they may have you come back in for additional tests that do test specifically for kidney function. We also look at white count, hemoglobin, platelets. Some of those can be urine in your are still protein in your urine, so they may have you do a urine sample. That's the beginning, and that's why it's hard, and we need to bring awareness about multiple myeloma, is because it's not like breast cancer, where there's one specific test, for instance, that you have a family history, that's done. There is genetic testing, but you have to investigate.
And if you, don't panic, don't think, oh my God,
Mm.
don't, the hip is one of the areas, but don't panic every time you feel something. We do it already, so. We're all, back to our lines, we already think every day, this is something we live with every day. Am I gonna relax? And I told you, that was a lie. I know what research says, that eventually it will, but I will not. So, you have to have that faith. But if you want to, you've been here today, got all this knowledge, if you want to ask him, why are you doing blood work? You're gonna go back to your blood work, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and happy birthday.
Thank you. It's the 29th. The 29th.
29, happy 29th birthday.
Thank you. They celebrating it today at work.
Why weren't you going to get your blood work? I'm just curious.
Because I'm a single mother in life, and I just put it to the back. And my boss made me come today to sit in for our center, and I think that's God just telling me, "Go, girl, go get your blood work." So I just have it sitting on my dashboard in my car. It was, and it was like a couple weeks ago.
My brother said, oh, I don't have to get blood work. I said, you go back, get blood work, get your physical, or get doctor.
Yeah, he's very thorough. I have it sitting on my dashboard, and I'm like, I'm gonna go. And his life gets to us, but I'm definitely gonna go and get my blood work. Yes.
If the protein high or hemoglobin low or anything of that nature.
Okay.
And that's where you are. And mention any aches or pain you feel. Don't ignore your body.
Yeah.
Your body's
I just felt like it's because I sit at a desk all day. I'm fat.
I will say exercise.
Yeah.
And I have a son who thinks he's my father. And then I have 2 daughters and friends that will say, I do need to exercise more. I started and stopped. Like you said, some days, even from the stem cell transplant, you get fatigued. And you have to push yourself to get out of bed, go to work. Once I'm working okay, but some days I can go home and just crash and sleep for hours. I still have that from time to time. And Dr. Ayash told me that it'll get better and better. And it has. It's gotten better. But there are some days when your body, you have to listen to your body and just rest. But I think my diet did help me.
Okay.
And as I said, I was on the Mediterranean diet. I think that did help. And I also think exercise. And I don't drink enough water. I'm trying to do better with that. Staying hydrated.
That's all I drink.
Yes, that's right. And we as African Americans need to watch our diets anyway. Diabetes, and this is just something else we need to be aware of also.
All right, y'all. I apologize, but that'll be our last question for this session. Let's give it up for Jen, Ellen, and Omi. Such great information and great questions. Thank you all for listening. And again, most of our panelists are staying, so please feel free to ask your questions within the crowd. Y'all ready for the last session? All right. Thank y'all so much for all the engagement today. We've had so many amazing stories and advice so far. One big theme that I've heard is this spirit of advocacy that we all need to have or to have in our communities. Sometimes, especially for folks in this room, you might tell your doctor that you have a pain in your knee and they might say, oh, that's because of old age. Now we know because of the conversations today that no, double check. Maybe it's not just because of old age. Do my blood work and ask the questions that some of our panelists have spoken to, okay? So I want to make sure we take that away. And on the topic of advocacy, we also heard a lot about how folks are incorporating spirituality into their multiple myeloma journeys, right? And the role of community. So this last panel is going to dig into that a lot more, okay? So we're going to talk about spirituality, advocacy, and community. And with that, I'd love to welcome 3 amazing panelists today. We have Robert, Kevin, and Miss Shirley Cotton. Can y'all come to the stage and y'all give them a hand? And one of y'all will be next to me. And actually, I'll sit here if that's okay. You can be right here. Thank you. Thank you, Miss Shirley, and thank you, George. So we have a lot of incredible folks up here. Mr. Robert has 35 years in the professional industry doing a lot of incredible work, but also a ton of work in his community. And both Shirley and Kevin are very much involved in being coaches within their communities and advocates, especially in the spiritual faith. So starting off, I wanted to kick off with Kevin because we had conversations with all of these folks before bringing them into this event today. And Kevin said something that really struck us. And he mentioned that disease can have spiritual roots, okay? And that was really powerful. And we wanted to understand a little bit more about what he meant by that. So Kevin, can you start by sharing what you mean by disease can have spiritual roots?
Yes, first of all, I want to say thank you to a few people. 3 of them are not in the room, so they're being disobedient. But the first one I want to thank is Dr. Zonder, who I met in 2020 when my body was diagnosed with multiple myeloma. And I want to, my sister earlier said that God gave her this. Well, I wanted to remind her, God didn't give you this. God does not give us disease. But I also want to thank someone who's listening virtually, and that's my sister in Atlanta, who checks on me every day and loves me like my mama. But the other people are outside right now. That I have a caregiver who's been very gracious to care for me since January when I had CAR T-cell therapy, and the other two are outside also, but they check on me every day, and having care means a lot. I want to say that I have something, it's a disease that I call sometimers. Sometimes I forget things, so I have to write them down. Spiritual roots. And I'm going to share what I've written here. When I share my bio, I use the term spiritual root, and I was asked what that means. Here's what I believe. We are all spiritual beings housed in a biological body of flesh. Wouldn't it be interesting if we could learn to diagnose the condition of our spirit in the same manner that we do our bodies? I believe it's possible. I think many of the diseases we experience in our bodies result from what's happening in our spirit. And I was just sharing with Dr. Zander, particularly in our community. The question was posed, why so much in our community? Well, when you study the history of Black people in this country over the last 400 years, there's nobody that has gone through what we've gone through. And that has affected our spirits over time. And I think that there's things that can become traumatic to us and reside within us. We all know about fear. We know about a lot of things. Years ago, I want to share this with you. Years ago, I had one of the most emotionally difficult times of my entire life. And in that experience, I had the opportunity to discover my spirit. You see, I knew my flesh because the world teaches me how to identify myself by my flesh, but I didn't know who I really was as a spirit being. But trauma gave me the opportunity to do that. Went through a very difficult time emotionally. My readiness came about out of that trauma, which led me to a place of absolute desperation. And there's an old ancient Chinese proverb, I think it is, that says that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Desperation made me ready. I want to say little things in between this. As a man of God, I believe that we have the power of life and death in our tongue. So we have to be very careful about what we say and what we hear. On this traumatic journey that I had to come to know my spirit much like I had learned to know my body over the years. I've learned to listen to my body. And I began that back in the 70s. No, I don't look that old, but I've been around for a while. I had to begin learning the language of my spirit. I discovered that emotions are the language of the spirit. And as a man, I didn't know many emotions. I also didn't see the value of learning and naming them. This was very difficult for what I like to call my male ego flesh. But I had a mentor that took me under his wing and he guided me, he discipled me. And he taught me that there's a lot of healthy emotions and there's a lot of unhealthy emotions. So when I use the term spiritual roots, I'm referring to the emotions that can establish themselves in the recesses of our spirit from childhood to this present moment. I've learned a lot through this journey, and it's been a very difficult one. But one of the things that I learned a long time ago from my grandmother, she said to me, she said, there's a treasure in every trial, but you'll never find that treasure if you don't embrace the trial. And so I've embraced this trial. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be an overcomer and a champion of hope. So that's what I mean by the spiritual roots.
Thank you, Robert. I'm sorry, Kevin. Keep mixing up my names. But yeah, Kevin, I think you raised a number of great points because again, sometimes we'll go to a place and maybe our body's saying something, maybe even our doctor saying something initially, right? But we have to make sure to listen holistically to everything that we might be hearing. And that might be coming from a spiritual place of, hey, I need to look into this a little more, or maybe I need to come to this event and see what folks are talking about and take in this information. So thank you so much, Kevin, for that. And I wanted to also ask Ms. Shirley about your journey. You have, since becoming diagnosed, also become a huge advocate. You might not have seen Ms. Shirley at the front of the table today because she had her own table in the back also sharing resources. So she's working double duty, but could you tell us a little bit more about your journey and how you've been an advocate in the community?
Well, my journey started with a injury. I was roller skating, and I'm standing on the skates at the roller skating rink, and all of a sudden, I go down, and I'm thinking, how did I get down there? You know, I'm a skater, right? And I don't fall. So, but that resulted in an injury of my ankle, and I had some surgery. And I can remember waking up from the surgery and my husband said, you know, the doctor said your bones look like you're 80 years old. I said, what? So from that, I recovered from the injury, but when I went back to my PCP, he said, you know what, you have some difficulty, some abnormality in your blood. I'm going to send you to a hematologist. I said, okay, didn't think much about it, even though I should have. So I went to the hematologist, and it turned out that I had MGUS, and you all have heard what MGUS is all about. And so I said, okay, where are we going? And then it kind of frightened me in a way, because 6 years, 7 years prior to that, my mother was diagnosed with multiple myeloma. And I later found out that my grandfather had passed with multiple myeloma. So I was kind of a little freaked out, but he said, oh, don't worry about it. You know, we're going to watch you. So for 15 years, I was watched. A hematologist would take blood 2 or 3 times a year. I had a bone and mineral specialist who also had osteopenia, which is like a precursor to osteoporosis. And then I had my PCP, right? And so after about 15 years, long story, make it shorter, is that I ended up with active multiple myeloma. When I was diagnosed, I had 4 cycles of a particular cocktail. Doctors on there talks about cocktails. And from there, they told me, well, you know, you're doing pretty good. You're a good candidate for a stem cell transplant. So I had the stem cell transplant, and I did well with that. And as you have heard with that, it was 100 days of being quarantined. I only went out of the house for lab work or to go to see the doctor. After the 100 days, I was doing well, and I was put on what's called a maintenance treatment. And so basically, I was in remission. So I stayed in remission about 5 years. And after that, I had a test done and found out, I had a PET scan done, found out that I had a lesion. The bottom line is that the treatment that I was taking had stopped working. And that's something that happens with multiple myeloma. But thank God, though, there are so many types of medication now that you try something else. And so that is basically where I am right now. I am stable, considered stable. Am I in complete remission right now? Maybe not, right? See, he's like, I'm not, but I'm stable. It's kind of like this. I'm not going to bother it, so it's not going to bother me. It's not stopping me from doing anything. Okay, so that is kind of where I am on my journey.
Thank you, Shirley. And I know you're doing a lot of advocacy work, and we can talk about that as well. So thank you so much for sharing your journey since then. And for Robert, you, as I mentioned earlier, are super active in the community. You even serve on a number of boards, and you're a co-minister. So since your diagnosis, how has that affected you and your involvement in the community?
Well, first of all, I'd like to just thank MMRF and Accolade for being here and giving us an opportunity to share our stories. Being an advocate, as has been talked about, is really where I'm at in my journey. I am 130 days past transplant on May 17th. And the caregivers, Dr. Zonder is also my doctor. I did my stem cell transplant with my own collected stem cells from 2019. I went on a clinical trial, and that clinical trial, I got randomized to no medication after the first 2 years, after having been on a cocktail. And I was 3 years with no medication and no measurable disease. So that is the positive of clinical trials, is no one's really talked much about this, but quality of life is really, really important for us folks. And I say that predominantly because before being diagnosed, I was not as active. I was not exercising as much. And now I do a lot of activity. I get involved in many things. And the question being about boards and things that I serve on. Well, I retired in 2020, and I always wanted to retire before I got to the age of 60. And so multiple myeloma, in my mind, was a blessing for me because it allowed me to retire at 59 and a half. And I retired to serve in the community. I am the chair of the West Bloomfield Parks and Recreation Commission. I've held that position for about 13 years, and I enjoy it. But not only that, I enjoy interacting with others that have been diagnosed with cancer, and I serve as the co-chair of the Patient and Family Advisory Council within Carmanos. So I listen to others who have been diagnosed with various different cancers, and I try to take that message back to the hospital leaders so that they understand those that they're caring for. And you know, Dr. Zonder's been talked about wonderfully, but you know, quite frankly, he was blushing earlier, but he really is my top doc. And quite frankly, I think all of us patients, as well as those that are going to potentially be patients, need to understand their bodies, okay? And so where I serve today in boards, I start talking to people about health at my lowest board, which is a Detroit Public School Board of Hanley International here in Hamtramck. I start talking early on in front of children, in front of their parents. I talk anywhere I'm asked here in the neighborhood because I grew up within 1 mile of this facility. And so that is also important to me, that my community knows about multiple myeloma. I didn't know. My sister, who's here, has been diagnosed with MGUS, and you know, she's being monitored. We believe that in our family, and this is family specific, that potentially there's some DNA of sorts that has it in our family, because my mother, when she gave birth to me, she had cancer, but cancer in 1961 was not talked about in the African American community. My mom got treatment at, I believe it was Harper or Hutzel Hospital downtown Detroit, but she doesn't have the records, nor does she know what she was treated with. And so therefore, she wanted to keep it a secret. She never talked to me about it until I was diagnosed with multiple myeloma. Folks, we have an opportunity today to talk about diseases and things so that we make them chronic illnesses. Multiple myeloma, to me, in my faith walk, as Kevin spoke about, is something that in our spirits we have to. Again, we have to tell somebody so that we can be advocates and thrivers, because without telling anyone, no one knows. They don't know what to ask their doctor when they go to see him. They don't know how to look at their own blood work. You know, technology is going to make medicine, and I think some of you already know this, is the PCP business, or primary care, has reduced. There's much fewer PCP doctors out there now than there were just 5 years ago. And so the problem we're going to have if we don't keep up with our own health and our own technologies is we're not going to be able to take care of ourselves. So folks, I want you to get out there and do the things that are right for your body and listen to them, and do the things that have been talked about by other colleagues here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. So that adds on to your homework list from this event today, right? We talked about making sure that you're getting this information in and letting it settle, making sure that you bring it to your doctor's appointments, making sure that you have an advocate, and also making sure that you tell at least one other person, right? At least one other person. At Now Included, our community platform, we talk a lot about intergenerational health, and it made me really happy to hear that some of you heard about this through your daughters, your sons, your cousins, and that's because it's really essential that we make sure within families that this information continues to spread. So thank all of you for being inspirations. And Shirley, I'm going to bring it back to you because, again, all of y'all are very active in your communities, but it's not easy to be active in the community even just without having a diagnosis of multiple myeloma and having to navigate everything that you all navigate. So what inspired you to take on the additional responsibilities of being an advocate in your community?
When I look back on my journey and I think about, okay, what did I know about multiple myeloma? Who was around, when I was diagnosed? And I look back at some of the challenges that I had. So what inspires me is the fact that it was, here and there was a bumpy road. It was a bumpy road. And because I had been monitored for 15 years, I felt like I kind of would have liked to have known that I was progressing to full-blown multiple myeloma, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. But the bottom line is it was bumpy. It was bumpy. But what I felt, sometimes being discouraged after I started to really find out information about multiple myeloma, about the testing, about the resources, and I'm thinking I was maybe 5 or 6 years into it, and I just that's when I found it out, and I'm thinking, what's up with that? Okay. But what inspires me to just work hard to try to let people know is that I had some feelings that were really not like me. They were not God-honoring feelings and disappointments, and I still do not want anyone to have to go through some of the things that I've gone through. And so that's why I'm involved in 3 different three different agencies that I volunteer with. And so you mentioned something earlier about how am I able to do what I do? And I have to say, honest to goodness, it's only by the grace of God. Only by the grace of God, and because of the support that I've had from my husband, my family, my two brothers, the support that I've had from not a whole bunch of friends, but several really good friends that stuck by me, encouraged me. And that is how I just keep on keeping on. Now, about advocacy, I'll talk about that, right? So, how do I advocate? Well, I'm in one agency that it's called Health Tree, where I learned a lot. And a matter of fact, there are just so many agencies out here. You got MMRF, you have IMF, that's International Myeloma Foundation. You have Health Tree. Right here in this area, there is an organization called Cure Multiple Myeloma that does a lot, fundraisers. So I kind of get around. So when people have, these agencies have things like that, you most likely are going to see me. You're going to see me. So I talk a lot. Once I get to know you, or I'm talking about multiple myeloma, I talk a lot. So how do I get information to the people like down on at the beginning, the people at church, the people at work? Well, I go to churches, and sometimes pastors will allow me 10 or 15 minutes during the service, or sometimes after the service, to share my story or to talk about multiple myeloma. I go to health fairs. This past summer, there was, you'll remember it, the Black Men's Wellness that was at Perfecting. I was there. And that gives me a chance to network with people. I also go around to cancer centers like Carmanos, St. John, Henry Ford, and I get an opportunity, I connect with social workers. And so when I connect with social workers, I always have materials to give them, and then they give to patients that have multiple myeloma, because when you're diagnosed with it, you need information right then and there. And you need written information, because honest to goodness, when I heard that I had multiple myeloma, actually, it was a brand new doctor that told me, and at that point, I had excess calcium in my bloodstream. And he came over to me and he said, "Mrs. Cotton, you have multiple myeloma. You have a lot of calcium in your bloodstream, and you need to have a treatment." He came over to me, helped me up, and walked me over to the infusion center. And actually, from that time, I was kind of in the daze that whole year, but that's a whole nother story. Just this last week, the MMRF walk that was at Riverwalk, did anybody attend that? You know about it? You were there. Okay, so that is another way that I network. So I had the opportunity to speak to Hal, what's Hal's last name? Anderson? Okay. Hal I met him at Carmanos. I went to the walk, but Hal is a 28-year survivor, thriver of multiple myeloma. 28 years. And not only that, he has been very, very active in raising money. I think he won 2 awards. I think his team raised like $20,000. So there's so many people around that encourage me to keep on stepping in there, and I always encourage people to get into support groups, because this is not a journey that you want to try to take by yourself. And you may not think, well, I don't want to talk about it, but believe me, once you get in a group, whether it's in person or even on Zoom, it has been very, very it's very, very beneficial. And there is so much out there of people that want to help us with multiple myeloma. There are cancer retreats. I go on those. All they have to do is call my name and I'm there. There are cancer camps to go to, and they're not all multiple myeloma, but it's about bonding with other people and sharing your story and knowing that you're not alone. So that is what I do. That is what I do. Oh, I know what. I forgot. Another way that I advocate, there is an organization, I got to tell you about this. There is a study going on. It's called the PROMISE Study. It's being done at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute in Boston. And it is a study that the folks there are wanting to, what they're offering is a free screening for multiple myeloma, or the beginnings of it. And so the goal is that in order to kind of figure out why people of color have multiple myeloma so much, the only way to do that is they need to get the blood. And so they're offering a free screening, and they're particularly, you can enroll in the PROMISE study. I have the brochures back there on the table. It's for individuals that are 30 years of age and who identify as being Black or African American or people of color. Or if you are an individual who is 30 years of age and over, if you have a first-degree relative that has been diagnosed with any type of blood cancer, you're eligible to be part of this study. Also, individuals who are 18 years or older and have had 2 or more first and second degree blood relatives diagnosed with any blood cancer can also participate. So this is your opportunity to be part of the solution. I've heard so many up here talk about that this is something that we can do. It's an easy thing to do. You go online or you can call and they'll tell you how it can be done. It doesn't cost anything. I've had 4 or 5 people in my family to go through the process.
Amazing.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Shirley. And one thing that you mentioned is the importance of meeting people where they are, which we emphasize a lot within the work that we do. And that's partially why we're here at the Northwest Activity Center, right? We heard so many great things about this being a space where people come just for everyday quality of life activities, right? And then y'all decided to come and join us for this particular event. So we want to continue making sure that we meet community where they are and provide these information and resources. So thank you so much, Ms. Shirley. And Kevin, I wanted to turn it back to you because in this conversation around spirituality, sometimes it's a tricky topic for folks to think about the intersection of spirituality and medicine. Some people might say, well, I'm going to leave it in God's hands and I don't need to go back to that doctor. He's not telling me what I want to hear, or that treatment is not making me feel good. I'm not going back. And of course, we want people to be advocates for themselves, and we want people to listen to their bodies as well as their spirituality. But how have you navigated that journey over time in terms of thinking about your spirituality and the intersection of medicine?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to address a fallacy that you just mentioned that we oftentimes subscribe to, and that is, we say, I'm going to take it to God and leave it in God's hands. Well, God gave it to you or allowed you to experience it. So it's your responsibility to listen to him and do what you need to do. Again, I go back to, well, first I want to go back. In 2020, when my body was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, I interviewed a few doctors, Dr. Cole, Dr. Ashkar, ultimately led me to Dr. Zonder. And when I met him, and I think this goes to any doctor that you go and visit with, one of the things that stood out significantly with Dr. Zonder, and this is what I love about him, is that he didn't see a person with a disease. He saw a disease with a person. And that made a difference for me. Reconciling this diagnosis for me initially was when I first heard the word cancer, oh, that tape that we get recorded in our minds over and over again, it brought about fear. And that was the last time it came. And that was in 2020, because God reminded me of all the things that he's done in my life and the lives of my family members. And I was reminded of scriptures that God said to me, I'm not giving you a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. And I have stood on that from the very beginning. And I've never feared in the entire process. I went to Jeffrey, I don't know if you remember this, in 2020, after I understood that, you know what, there's a spiritual root to this matter. And I went to Jeffrey and I said, Jeffrey, you know, when I die, I'm only going to die of one thing, and one thing only. And that's the same thing that everybody before me has died of and everybody after me will die of. You know what that is? It's death. It's that simple. It's death. The only reason we die is because of sin. And so I've stood on that. Now, I've reconciled that with that platform. When this manifestation in my body occurred, because of the things that God has graciously taught me and I've learned from others throughout my journey over these past 68 years, I went to God and I said, okay, God, what is this? My wife was cured of what the medical community still to this day classifies as an incurable disease called Hashimoto's thyroiditis. It's hypothyroidism and hypothyroidism at the same time. But she was cured through knowledge. And the doctors were amazed. They had no explanation, but we did. And so with that experience and understanding, it began to lay a foundation for me to reconcile this matter of faith and medicine. Nobody knows everything. Doctors don't know everything. We don't know everything. But you know who knows everything? God. And you know where he lives? In you. And that's what I rested upon. But when I began this journey, I began to seek God and began to utilize the resources that have been available to me. And one morning, I was meditating, and this was early on in the process, and God brought this scripture to me, and I didn't know why. It's Proverbs 14:30. It says, a sound heart is the life of the flesh, but envy, the rottenness of the bones. And I said, what? I don't understand. And then it dawned on me. They classified this disease as a bone disease, as a blood or bone disease. And then I said, well, wait a minute, I'm not envious. God, I'm not envious. And I don't know about you and your walk with God and how you communicate with him, but I talk to him just like I'm talking to you. No thous and those. It's just like this. Envy. I'm praying. I prayed for days. And then one morning, I heard that still small voice say to me, your wife. It's my wife. Oh, nah, can't be. So I meditated, and then you know what I realized? God showed me, took me back to 1984 when my first daughter was born. You see, when my wife met me, she doted on me more than I did her. And then we had a baby. And all of that tension that I used to get, I didn't get anymore. Well, a spirit of jealousy established itself, and I didn't even know it. Over time, we ended up with 5 children, and every time we had a child, I lost more of that attention. And then as time passed, we homeschooled our kids, and I worked all the time and traveled. So she had a platform to build something with my children that I didn't. And over time, she developed a relationship that I became envious of. And I didn't even see it for years. When this revelation came to me back in 2020, I went through the process of, first of all, I had to recognize it. Then I had to repent, renounce, and resist, and go through that process that I had learned, that my wife had learned from knowledge. And within a few months of treatment, because what I told Jeffrey was, I said, Jeffrey, listen, I'm going to entrust you and the biological knowledge you have to treat my body, but I'm going to God to treat my spirit. And we did that, and within the first year, Jeffrey came to me and said, man, your blood work is phenomenal. He said, I've never seen anybody respond to treatment like this quick. And I said, Jeffrey, that's because I'm already healed. You're just walking me through recovery. And that's what this has been. It's been a journey of recovery. By the end of December, they couldn't measure the disease. 3 months later, we did another biopsy. Couldn't measure the disease. Well, we went on maintenance then, and I won't go into the details of my journey, but my journey has been a journey, and I'm still recovering, but I'm already healed. I hope you get that. So I'm gonna try to finish with some notes that I took about faith and health. I'm going to say some things that you may have difficulty hearing and processing. But I just humbly ask that you try to have an open heart and a mind. Let me make it extremely clear that I'm not a religious person anymore. However, there is a man that I follow. This man is spoken of extensively in a book known worldwide as the Bible. I don't want to create any separation in anyone's mind by putting a religious label on myself or any of you. But this man that I follow, he only had one label for those who follow him: believer. I'm a believer. So how do I reconcile faith and health? I reconcile it with believing and hope. I believe all we have to do is believe. Who, what, when, where, and how, and why do you believe? Only you can answer those questions for yourself. I believe the truth resides deep within each one of our spirits. When we come in contact with the truth externally, we can allow that truth to manifest itself in our lives. When we come to know the truth in this manner, it will set us free. Not make us free, but set us free. That's a process. Then we're free to believe to hope and have faith. On my journey, here's some things that have encouraged and strengthened me. This was a major revelation for me. In 1 Corinthians 13:13, it says, "And now abideth faith, hope, and love. These three, but the greatest of these is love." Well, I believe God is a God of order. And this was given to us in an order. Well, if the latter was the greatest, then I believe the one preceding it was the next greatest. What was that? That was hope. I think without hope, we cannot have faith. Amen. Why do I think that? Because if I go to Hebrews, it says, now faith is, not tomorrow, not yesterday, but now faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things yet unseen. You can't see my healing, but I'm healed. You see, without hope, we don't have anything. I'm done.
Thank you, Kevin. And I know our initial question was just, okay, some people feel like medicine and spirituality is at God's. And I think, Kevin, you did a great job at just highlighting, and really everyone who's been on the stage has highlighted that in life, oftentimes we're in rooms and around people where we can feel the presence of God, right? We feel a sense of love, we feel a sense of faith, and we feel a sense of hope. So when we have fear that maybe drives us away from medical procedures or medical processes, we reflect on that sense of love, faith, and hope that we feel it oftentimes and go towards spaces where we do sense that. And that might mean finding a different doctor. That might mean leaning into your caregivers and getting a second opinion, right? But we can find that, and it doesn't mean that we stop our journeys there. With our last question of the day, we're going to turn it back to Robert. So thank you, Shirley and Kevin, so much. Again, you are doing so much in the community already, and we wanted you to share with the community today a little bit about what you hope your living legacy to be.
Well, first of all, I've got to go back to Kevin. I asked Kevin, where did he preach? Because he was talking to me at the table. And now I know he preaches everywhere he goes. Amen. Amen.
If I could say, we homeschooled our kids, and we call our school the school without walls. And my wife, rest in peace, she had a mission statement for our school, and she adopted it from St. Francis of Assisi. And it goes a little something like this. He says, "Go into all the world and preach the gospel to everyone you know, everyone you see all the time. And if you have to, use words." So that's where that came from.
Amen. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you. Thank you. And now to answer the question of legacy. If I live today, for today, and I show my family and all of my community I engage with the love and the hope that Kevin just talked about, that's what life is all about. What I love about my doctor is that when we think about the treatment, he asks the question, what's going on in your family? What's going on in your life? Because the medicines and the care need to be aligned with the best quality of life for what it is that you're trying to accomplish in your life. And I say you, but Kevin told you what's in you. God is in you. And you need to be giving to others so that you can be fulfilled. And so legacy to me, and having grown up here in this neighborhood, was to be successful in my career in my younger years. When I was in my 20s and 30s, my mother said, "You're going to be an executive at General Motors. You're going to be so successful in life." And I thought about it and I said, well, when I get done with that, am I successful? And so I spent 25 years at General Motors. At the end of that 25 years, General Motors and Delphi, which I was also part of, became bankrupt. And you know what? That was heartfelt for me, because 25 years of your time put into a company makes you feel a certain way. And I think all of us here today have experienced what careers and jobs, when they don't turn out to be what you thought they were going to be, how it leaves a hole in your life. Well, that's not a life legacy. A life legacy is how you deal with life and share it with others. You see, legacy to me is now about my family, my wonderful wife, my life as it goes forward until I meet death, as Kevin said. But not death from multiple myeloma, but death from this world to be in a better place, in a better world. That's the legacy I'm living for today. And I hope each and every one of you are thinking about your health, because you're here talking amongst us, and that you don't ignore things. You know, when the young lady talked about going for her blood work, all I can think to myself is when my PCP said I was going through the same things that you've heard everybody else going through, back pain, and I had sciatica and everything else. And he put me on his bone density table, and he told me the numbers were negative off the table. I said, how can they be negative off the table? He said, well, you have severe osteoporosis. So your mother and everybody else in your family must have really bad osteoporosis. He said, I've never seen anything like this. No, my body was leaching its calcium out, and I was having all kinds of issues, and he had basically missed it. He apologized to me. But legacy is about not looking back. I could say, well, I blame my PCP because he didn't do X, Y, and Z. But at the end of the day, I need to look at myself. And legacy becomes what I'm looking for and giving to others in the community. And why do I serve on boards, and why am I active in the community? I am because I want to give of myself to others as God has given to me. Thank you for listening to all of us.
Let's give one more round of applause to everyone on this panel and everyone who's shared their experiences throughout the day. Thank you so much.